When Lucas draws, his eyes turn completely white. Not the pale white of rolled-back pupils, but a luminous, milk-glass white that seems to glow from within. His mother noticed it first 3 years ago, during the seizure that changed everything. But what she saw after he woke up was worse. He looked at her with the eyes of someone much older, someone who had seen things no child should ever witness, and whispered a single word she didn't understand: Atlas. The doctors called it a grand mal seizure, neurological event, brain misfiring. They used technical terms that meant nothing and explained even less. They prescribed medications with names she couldn't pronounce, adjusted dosages, ran tests that showed normal brain activity, normal everything. But nothing was normal about what Lucas did when he woke up from those episodes. Nothing was normal about the way he stared at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. Before we continue, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from, because what happened to this family could be happening in yours right now, and you'd never know until it was too late. It started on a Tuesday in March. Lucas was 4 years old, playing with toy cars on the living room carpet. His mother, Sarah, was folding laundry 10 feet away. She remembered the exact moment because she had just picked up one of his small shirts, thinking how fast he was growing, when she heard the sound. Not a cry or a shout, but a wet, choking gasp. She turned and saw him on the floor, rigid, his small body locked in a position that looked painful, unnatural. His eyes were open, but seeing nothing. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. The seizure lasted 2 minutes and 37 seconds. She counted every one. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was over. Lucas was breathing normally. His color had returned, but he wasn't responsive. He stared at the ceiling with those empty eyes, and when they finally focused, when they finally saw her again, they were different, older, haunted. In the hospital, he wouldn't speak for 6 hours. When he finally did, his first words made the nurse drop her clipboard. "I've been here before. This room, that crack in the ceiling. You're wearing the same perfume you wore last time." But there was no last time. Lucas had never been in a hospital before, never been in that room. The nurse had only started working there 2 weeks ago. The neurologist showed them brain scans that revealed nothing. No tumors, no lesions, no abnormalities of any kind. A perfectly healthy 4-year-old brain doing inexplicable things. They sent him home with anti-seizure medication and instructions to monitor him closely. Sarah barely slept that first night. She sat by his bed watching his chest rise and fall, checking every few minutes to make sure he was still breathing. At 3 in the morning, she found him sitting up, staring at his hands in the darkness. "Lucas, baby. What's wrong?" He didn't look at her. "These aren't my hands. They're too small. Everything is too small." The seizures continued. One every few weeks at first, then more frequently. Each time, the same pattern. The rigid collapse, the white eyes, the 2 to 3 minutes of absence from his own body. And each time he woke up, he was different for a few hours. He would say things that made no sense, use words he shouldn't know, reference events that never happened. Once, he described in perfect detail a house they'd never lived in, down to the color of the curtains and the squeaky 3rd step on the stairs. Sarah's grandmother had lived in that house. Sarah had never told Lucas about it, never shown him pictures, but the drawings were what terrified her most. They started after the 3rd seizure. Lucas had never been particularly artistic before. His drawings typical for a 4-year-old. Stick figures, houses with triangle roofs, circular yellow suns. But after waking from that 3rd seizure, he picked up a pencil and drew something else entirely. A symbol. Complex, geometric, impossibly precise for a child's hand. 3 vertical lines connected by a horizontal bar at the top, with a circle around it and strange marks radiating outward. Below it, he wrote in careful block letters, 3IATLAS. He drew it again the next day, and the day after that. Different paper, different pencils, different lighting, but always the same symbol, always the same precise proportions. Sarah found them everywhere, stuffed under his mattress, hidden behind books on his shelf, folded into tiny squares in his pockets. 23 drawings in the first month alone. By his 5th birthday, there were 68. By his 6th, 112. She stopped counting after that. They were everywhere, a paper trail of something she couldn't name, couldn't understand, couldn't stop. The neurologist had no answers. A pediatric psychiatrist suggested obsessive-compulsive tendencies triggered by neurological trauma. An art therapist said it was his way of processing the seizures, creating order from chaos. But none of them could explain the architectural precision of the drawings, the mathematical exactness of the proportions, or why a child who could barely write his own name could reproduce this symbol flawlessly, hundreds of times, without variation. And none of them could explain the other drawings, the ones she found hidden in places she never looked, places she only discovered by accident, the ones that showed things Lucas had never seen, buildings that didn't exist. Cities she didn't recognize, and always, in every single one, the same image in the background. A sky split in two, one half black, one half burning orange-red, and below it, everything on fire. When Lucas turned 7, the seizures changed. They lasted longer. 4 minutes, 5, once, terrifyingly, almost 8. During that 8-minute seizure, Sarah called 911 again, certain she was losing him. But when the paramedics arrived, Lucas was already waking up. The first thing he did was reach for a pencil. He didn't speak. He didn't acknowledge anyone in the room. He just drew. This time, it wasn't just the symbol. This time, it was a date, written in the same careful block letters, repeated over and over across the page. A date, 14 months in the future, September 7th. And beneath it, words that made Sarah's blood run cold. The day everything ends. She took the drawing to their neurologist, who referred them to a specialist, then another specialist, then a research team at a university 3 hours away who studied cases of childhood epilepsy with unusual psychological manifestations. They ran more tests, more brain scans, more blood work. They found nothing except a perfectly healthy 7-year-old boy who shouldn't be having seizures at all. But it was a graduate student in the research lab who noticed something everyone else had missed. She was cataloguing Lucas's drawings for a case study when she recognized something in the architectural details of the burning city. She pulled up historical photographs on her computer and compared them side by side. The building in Lucas's drawing, the one prominent in the foreground, matched a structure that had existed in Berlin in 1943, a structure that had been destroyed during the war. A structure that Lucas had drawn with perfect accuracy down to the number of windows and the decorative stonework above the entrance. How could he know that? How could he draw something he'd never seen, something that hadn't existed for 80 years, with photographic precision? The graduate student contacted her advisor, who contacted a colleague, who contacted someone else. Within a week, a man named Dr. Richard Graves arrived at their house. He wasn't a neurologist or a psychiatrist. He introduced himself as a researcher, specializing in cases of past life memory in children. Sarah nearly closed the door in his face, but he said something that stopped her. He said he'd seen Lucas's drawings. He said he knew what the symbol meant. He said they needed to talk before the next seizure because time was running out. They sat at the kitchen table while Lucas played in the next room. Dr. Graves spread out photographs, documents, pages of notes covered in handwriting so dense Sarah could barely read it. He'd been studying cases like Lucas's for 23 years. Children who remembered things they couldn't possibly know. Children who spoke languages they'd never learned. Children who drew places they'd never been. Described events that happened before they were born. Recognized people from photographs taken decades earlier. Most of the time, he explained, these memories faded as the children grew older. The veil between this life and whatever came before grew thicker, more opaque, until the memories were gone entirely, dismissed as imagination or dreams. But sometimes, in rare cases, the veil didn't thicken. Sometimes it tore wider, And when it did, the children didn't just remember fragments. They remembered everything. He asked to see all of Lucas's drawings, every single one. Sarah brought them out in boxes, shopping bags, folders stuffed with paper. She'd saved them all without quite knowing why, some instinct telling her they mattered, they meant something, even if she couldn't understand what. Dr. Graves spent 3 hours examining them, occasionally making notes, sometimes holding a drawing up to the light, checking details with a magnifying glass he pulled from his briefcase. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. These aren't just drawings of past life memories. These are warnings. The burning city appeared in 73 of the drawings. Different angles, different perspectives, but always the same scene. Always the split sky. Always the flames. And in 12 of them, tiny details in the foreground that Dr. Graves had to magnify to see clearly. People running, their bodies caught mid-motion, their faces turned upward towards something in the sky, something Lucas had drawn but never finished, leaving only suggestion, only shadow, and the symbol, the 3IATLAS mark. It appeared in 127 drawings. Dr. Graves recognized it. He'd seen it before in his research, in ancient texts, in archaeological records from sites scattered across 3 continents. It was old, older than most written language. It had been found carved into stone in caves in France, painted on pottery shards in Mesopotamia, etched into metal tablets in South America. Always the same design, always associated with the same concept. The watchers, the ones who remember, the ones who've seen the cycles repeat. Atlas wasn't a name, it was a title, a designation for someone who carried the weight of remembering, someone who had witnessed the end before and would witness it again. And if Lucas was drawing that symbol, if he was identifying himself with it, then he wasn't just remembering one past life. He was remembering multiple lives, a chain of lives stretching back further than Dr. Graves could calculate. Sarah listened to all of this feeling like she was falling, like the ground beneath her had turned to air. This is insane. You're telling me my 7-year-old son has lived before, multiple times, and he's drawing the end of the world. Dr. Graves met her eyes. I'm telling you that your son may be one of a very small number of souls who carry memory across lifetimes, who are meant to remember, who serve a purpose we don't fully understand. And yes, I'm telling you that he's trying to warn us about something he's seen happen before. The date on the drawing, September 7th, 14 months away. What happens then? Dr. Graves shook his head. I don't know. But whatever it is, Lucas has witnessed it at least once before, maybe more. And he's desperate to make sure someone listens this time. Sarah felt her chest tighten. How do you know it's happened before? How can you possibly know that? He pulled out one more document from his briefcase. It was a photograph of a stone tablet, weathered and ancient, covered in symbols and markings. In the center, unmistakable even across centuries, was the 3IATLAS symbol, and beneath it, carved in cuneiform script, a translation that Dr. Graves had written in pencil on the margin. The 7th witness speaks. The cycle completes. The sky breaks. What was, will be again. The 7th witness. Lucas had said it himself, hadn't he? Sarah's mind raced back to that moment in the hospital 3 years ago. Words she'd tried to forget, tried to convince herself she'd misheard. What had he said when he woke up? Something about 7 times. Something about seeing the end 7 times. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need you to leave. This is too much. This is crazy. Dr. Graves gathered his papers slowly, carefully. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table. Mrs. Fletcher, I understand this is overwhelming, but whether you believe me or not, whether you want to hear this or not, the seizures are going to get worse. The memories are going to become stronger. And when Lucas has his next episode, he's going to remember more than just fragments. He's going to remember everything. When that happens, you're going to need help. You're going to need someone who understands what's happening to him. He walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. The date he drew. September 7th. I've been tracking similar cases for years. children around the world, all experiencing the same type of memories, all drawing similar images, and they're all drawing the same date. Whatever's coming, it's not just Lucas who remembers it. It's not just one witness. They're all waking up, all remembering, all trying to warn us. He left. Sarah stood in the kitchen, staring at his business card, at the boxes of drawings covering her table, at the impossible truth spreading out before her like a map to somewhere she didn't want to go. From the living room, she heard Lucas humming. She walked to the doorway and watched him. He was drawing again, of course, always drawing. She couldn't see what it was from this angle, but she could see his hand moving with that same unsettling precision, that same adult confidence. "Lucas, baby, what are you drawing?" He didn't look up. "The place where I died last time. I need to remember it exactly. I need to remember what I did wrong so I can fix it this time." 3 weeks after Dr. Graves's visit, Lucas had another seizure. This one lasted 6 minutes and 42 seconds, the longest yet. Sarah held him through it, watching helplessly as his small body convulsed, as his eyes rolled back and filled with that terrible white light. When it finally stopped, when he finally went still, she thought for one horrifying moment that he wasn't breathing. But then his chest moved, once, twice, his eyes fluttered open. He sat up immediately, faster than he should have been able to, and reached for the pencil she kept on the coffee table now, always within reach, because she'd learned that fighting the drawings only made things worse. He drew for 40 minutes without stopping. His hand moved so fast, the pencil made a scratching sound against the paper, like an insect trying to escape. Sarah watched the image take shape. Not the burning city this time. Something else. A room. A laboratory, maybe, or a control center, screens on the walls, equipment she didn't recognize. And in the center, a device, circular, metallic, covered in symbols. When he finished, he looked at her with those ancient eyes. "I built this 743 years ago. I thought it would save us. It didn't." Sarah felt her hands shaking. "Lucas, sweetheart, you need to rest. You just had a seizure." He shook his head, already reaching for another piece of paper. "There's no time for rest. It's starting again. The others are waking up too. I can feel them. We're all remembering at the same time. That's never happened before. That means we're closer than I thought." "What others? What are you talking about?" He started drawing again. "The other witnesses. There are always 7, in every cycle. 7 souls who remember. 7 who carry the weight. I'm one. There are 6 more. Last time, we couldn't find each other fast enough. By the time we gathered, it was too late. This time has to be different." Sarah picked up her phone with trembling fingers and dialed the number on Dr. Graves's card. He answered on the second ring as if he'd been waiting. She told him what Lucas had said. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't let him out of your sight. And Mrs. Fletcher, if he draws any faces, any people, take pictures of those drawings immediately. We need to identify the other witnesses." He arrived 90 minutes later with 2 other people, a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Dr. Elena Rostova, a linguist specializing in ancient symbol systems, and a younger man, maybe 30, who said his name was James Chen and offered no explanation for why he was there. They came into the house like they'd done this before, moving with purpose, setting up a laptop on the dining table, spreading out maps and documents. Dr. Graves knelt in front of Lucas, who was still drawing, now on his 15th page. "Lucas, my name is Richard. I study children like you. Children who remember things from before. Can you tell me what you're remembering right now?" Lucas didn't stop drawing. "Everything. I'm remembering everything. All 7 lives. All 7 times I tried to stop it. All 7 times I failed." Dr. Rostova leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The symbol you draw. 3IATLAS. Do you know what it means?" Lucas finally looked up. "It's not a word in your language, it's older. It means the one who bears witness, the one who carries forward. 3 lines for past, present, future. One line connecting them because time isn't separate, it's continuous. The circle around it because the cycle repeats. Atlas because I hold up the weight of remembering, just like the Titan held up the sky. But I'm tired. 7 times is too many. 7 times watching the world burn because we couldn't figure it out fast enough. He returned to his drawing. This time, it was a face. A girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back. Asian features. Lucas drew her with the same precision he drew everything else, capturing details that seemed impossible for him to know. A small scar above her left eyebrow, a distinctive birthmark on her neck. James Chen went rigid. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and scrolled through photos. He found one and held it up next to Lucas's drawing. The resemblance was unmistakable. "That's my niece. That's May. She's in Beijing. She's been having seizures for 2 years. She draws the same symbol. How does he know what she looks like? They've never met. We've never even told anyone outside the family." Dr. Graves nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he'd suspected. That's how it works. The witnesses recognize each other across the veil. "Lucas, are there more? Can you draw the others?" Lucas was already starting a new drawing. 6 more. "I'll show you all of them. But you need to find them fast. We need to be together. We need to compare what we each remember. 7 lifetimes means 7 different perspectives, 7 different pieces of the puzzle. Separately, we only remember fragments. Together, we might remember enough to change what's coming." Over the next 3 hours, Lucas drew 5 more faces. A boy from Mumbai with a cleft lip scar. A girl from São Paulo with heterochromia. 1 blue eye, 1 brown. A teenage boy from London with distinctive red hair and freckles. An older child, maybe 12, from somewhere in rural Russia, judging by the traditional clothing Lucas drew him in. And finally, a girl from somewhere in the United States, though Lucas couldn't say where. She had blonde hair and wore glasses, and there was something about the way he drew her expression, sad and knowing, that made Sarah's chest ache. Dr. Graves photographed each drawing and immediately sent them to contacts around the world. His network of researchers, people who'd spent decades tracking cases like this, people who would recognize these children if they existed. The laptop began pinging within minutes. Confirmations. The boy from Mumbai had been hospitalized 4 times in the past year for unexplained seizures. The girl from São Paulo was in treatment for what doctors thought was childhood schizophrenia because she spoke in languages she'd never learned. The London teenager had been institutionalized after trying to convince his parents that the world was going to end in September. One by one, they found matches for every face Lucas had drawn. 7 children scattered across 5 continents, all between the ages of 6 and 13, all experiencing seizures, all drawing the same symbol, all trying to communicate something their families couldn't understand. 7 witnesses waking up at the same time, remembering 7 different lifetimes, 7 different perspectives on the same catastrophic event. Dr. Rostova was working on her laptop, comparing the symbols each child had drawn. They're not identical. Look, Lucas's version has these marks radiating outward in a specific pattern. May's version has different marks, angled differently. The boy from Mumbai uses dots instead of lines here. They're variations on the same base symbol, like dialects of the same language. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means each witness remembers from a different position, a different vantage point. Lucas's marks might represent what he saw from his location during the event. May's marks what she saw from hers. If we overlay all 7 versions, if we combine their perspectives, we might be able to map out what actually happens, where it starts, how it spreads." James Chen was on the phone speaking rapid Mandarin. When he hung up, his face was grim. "May's parents are willing to bring her to the United States. They've been desperate for answers. They'll do anything. But the others, I don't know if we can convince all their families. Some of them think their children are mentally ill. Some are in denial. The Russian boy's family is old believer Orthodox. They think he's possessed. We have to try. Dr. Graves stood, pacing. If Lucas is right, if the witnesses need to come together to remember fully, then we have less than 14 months to make it happen, and we need to figure out what they're trying to prevent. Lucas had stopped drawing. He was staring at the pile of papers in front of him, at the faces he'd rendered with such care. His own face looked drawn, exhausted, older than 7. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Last time we didn't find each other until 3 days before it happened. 3 days wasn't enough. We saw it coming, but we couldn't stop it. The time before that, we found each other 2 weeks early. Still not enough. We need months. We need time to remember everything, piece it all together, figure out the exact sequence. Because it's not just one event, it's a cascade. One thing triggers another, and by the time you see the pattern, it's too late to interrupt it. Sarah knelt beside her son, pushing his hair back from his forehead. "Baby, you need to rest. You've been drawing for hours." He looked at her, and for a moment, he was just Lucas again, just her little boy, scared and tired. "Mom, I don't want to remember anymore. It hurts. Every life hurts. Every time I watch everyone die, and I can't stop it, and I have to carry that forward into the next life, and the next life, and the next. I'm so tired." She pulled him close, feeling him shake. "I know, baby, I know." But even as she held him, even as she tried to comfort him, she could feel him slipping away again, back into the memories, back into the weight of 7 lifetimes pressing down on a 7-year-old mind. When he pulled away, the ancient eyes were back. "We need to start planning. We need to coordinate with the other witnesses' families. We need to establish communication protocols, and we need to start mapping the events leading up to September 7th. Whatever triggers the cascade, it doesn't start on that date. It starts before, maybe weeks before, maybe months. We need to identify the first domino so we can stop it from falling." Dr. Graves pulled up a document on his laptop. "I've been tracking anomalies, unexplained events around the world that might be connected. 3 weeks ago, a flock of birds fell from the sky in Nevada, dead, no explanation. 2 weeks ago, seismic sensors detected vibrations in the North Atlantic that don't match any known geological activity. Last week, Aurora Borealis appeared at latitudes where it's never been seen before. And yesterday, astronomers noticed something strange. A star that's been stable for decades suddenly started fluctuating, pulsing, like it's trying to communicate." Lucas nodded slowly. "It's starting. The signals always start months in advance. Nature knows before we do. Animals sense it. The earth feels it. The sky shows it. But humans don't pay attention until it's too late. We're too focused on what's right in front of us to see the pattern forming." "What pattern? What exactly happens on September 7th? Lucas picked up his pencil again. "Let me show you." He drew for another hour. This time, the images were different. Not buildings or symbols or faces, but events, sequential, a timeline. He drew the sun first, but wrong, distorted, with dark spots spreading across its surface. Then he drew electrical grids failing, cities going dark. He drew people looking up at a sky that was changing color, splitting, fracturing like glass. He drew earthquakes, not in one place but everywhere simultaneously. He drew oceans rising and pulling back and rising again. He drew the Aurora Borealis spreading south, farther and farther, until it covered the entire planet in sheets of green and red light. And in the final drawing, he drew the moment. The exact moment, everything changed. A pulse. That was the only way to describe it. A wave of energy emanating from somewhere, spreading outward in concentric circles, touching everything, changing everything. "Where does it come from?" Sarah asked, her voice barely steady. Lucas pointed to a spot on the drawing. "The sun, but not naturally. Something triggers it, something we did, something we built. In my first life, I was part of the team that built it. I was a scientist. I thought I was saving the world. I didn't realize I was ending it." Dr. Rostova leaned closer to the drawing. "A solar event? A coronal mass ejection? Bigger, worse." Lucas's hand trembled. We were trying to harness solar energy directly. We built a device, a collector, positioned in orbit. It was supposed to solve the energy crisis. Clean, unlimited power, but we didn't understand the feedback loop. When we activated it, it created a resonance. The sun responded. Not immediately, slowly, building over months. By the time we realized what was happening, the damage was done. The sun became unstable, and when it released that pulse, that wave of energy, it didn't just hit Earth. It hit everything in the solar system, every planet, every satellite, every living thing. James Chen was typing furiously on his phone. I need to check something. If this happened in a past life, if this was real, there might be records, evidence, archaeological evidence of a previous advanced civilization that experienced a cataclysm. Lucas shook his head. You won't find much. The pulse didn't just destroy, it reset, it wiped electromagnetic signatures, it melted technology, it left the world looking like it had never been advanced at all. Only stone survived, only the deepest caves, only the symbols we carved to warn the next cycle. The room fell silent. Sarah looked at the researchers, at her son, at the drawings spread across every surface. This is insane. Even if I believe any of this, even if Lucas really is remembering past lives, how do we stop it? If this happened before, if it's some kind of inevitable cycle, what can we possibly do? Dr. Graves met her eyes. That's why we need all 7 witnesses. Separately, they only remember their piece. Together, they might remember the flaw, the weak point in the cascade, the moment where intervention is still possible. Lucas stood abruptly, swaying slightly. His seizure recovery usually took hours, but the memories seemed to be energizing him, pushing him past normal physical limits. We need to call them. The other witnesses, tonight. We can't wait for everyone to travel here. We need to start sharing memories now. They set up video calls on 3 different devices. It took 2 hours to coordinate time zones and convince skeptical parents. But eventually, all 7 children appeared on screens around the dining room. May from Beijing, 12 years old, her eyes carrying the same ancient weight as Lucas's. Arjun from Mumbai, only 6, the youngest, but speaking with a confidence that didn't match his age. Gabriela from Sao Paulo, 10, her heterochromatic eyes flickering between blue and brown in the camera light. Thomas from London, 13, his red hair bright even through the pixelated connection. Dmitri from rural Russia, 11, his face solemn and carved with premature worry lines. And Emma from Minnesota, 8, her blonde hair pulled into pigtails that made her look even younger than she was. Lucas spoke first. You all know why we're here. You've all been remembering. You've all seen September 7th. We need to pool our memories. We need to figure out what each of us knows that the others don't. May nodded. I remember the mathematics. I was the one who calculated the energy output. I saw the numbers and I knew they were wrong, but the others didn't listen. They said I was being pessimistic. They said the safety margins were sufficient. They weren't. Arjun spoke in accented English, his vocabulary far beyond his years. I remember the location. The device was built in orbit, but the control center was on Earth, northern hemisphere, near the Arctic Circle. I can draw the exact coordinates. I've been trying to, but my parents keep hiding my pencils. Gabriela leaned closer to her camera. I remember the date it was activated. Not September, earlier, June 14th. That's when we turned it on. That's when the feedback loop began. By September, it was too late to shut down. Thomas cleared his throat. I remember the warning signs. The animals. They started behaving strangely in May. Migration patterns changed. Whales beached themselves. Birds stopped singing. We ignored it. We thought it was unrelated. Dmitri spoke in heavily accented English, his voice deep for an 11-year-old. I remember the people who tried to stop it. There was resistance. Scientists who saw the danger. Politicians who wanted to shut down the project. They were silenced, discredited, called alarmists, conspiracy theorists. By the time they were proven right, everyone was dead. Emma was crying softly. I remember the children. I worked in a school in that life. I remember trying to evacuate them when the pulse came. I remember their faces when the sky split open. I remember holding them while the world burned. I don't want to remember that. I don't want to see that again. Lucas's voice was gentle. We're remembering so it doesn't happen again. That's the point. We carry the memory forward so each cycle has a chance to break free. But we've failed 6 times. May's voice was sharp. 6 times we've remembered, and 6 times we've watched it happen anyway. What makes this time different? This time we found each other early. Lucas gestured to the screens. This time we have 14 months instead of 3 days. This time we have technology to communicate instantly across the world. And this time, maybe we remember enough to identify who's building the device now, in this cycle, before they activate it. Dr. Graves stepped into view of the cameras. I've been researching solar energy projects. There are 3 major initiatives worldwide that match the scale you're describing. One in Norway, one in Kazakhstan, one in the Australian outback. All 3 are planning orbital collectors. All 3 are scheduled to launch within the next 18 months. Arjun sat up straighter. Norway. I recognize that place name. That's where the control center was. That's where we need to focus. Dr. Rostova was already typing. The Norwegian Solar Initiative. Private funding, international consortium. They've been working on it for 8 years. Launch date scheduled for June 11th. 3 days before the activation date, Gabriella remembers. The children on the screens looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them that transcended language and distance. They were remembering together now, their separate memories interlocking like puzzle pieces. Thomas spoke slowly. If we know where it is, if we know when they plan to activate it, we can stop them. We can expose the danger. We can show them the calculations. May shook her head. They won't listen. They never listen. In every cycle we try to warn them. We show them the math. We explain the feedback loop, but they see unlimited clean energy. They see the solution to climate change. They see Nobel Prizes and historical legacy. They don't see the extinction event waiting on the other side of their ambition. Then we don't convince them. Dimitri's voice was cold. We sabotage it. We destroy the device before they can launch it. No. Lucas's voice cut through sharply. Violence leads to more violence. In the 3rd cycle, we tried that. We bombed the facility. We stopped the launch. But we created martyrs. We created a movement. They rebuilt it faster, angrier, with less oversight. They launched it 2 months later without proper testing. It failed even faster than the original design. We made it worse. So what do we do? Emma asked, her voice small. If we can't convince them and we can't stop them by force, what's left? We change the design. Lucas looked at each face on the screens. We infiltrate the project. We provide our expertise. We offer our knowledge. And we sabotage it from within, but subtly. We introduce flaws that look like accidents. We adjust calculations by small margins. We ensure that when they test the device, it fails safely. It fails in a way that scares them enough to abandon the project entirely without causing a catastrophe. But we're children. Gabriella gestured to herself. How do we infiltrate a multi-billion-dollar scientific initiative? We're not children. May's voice was firm. We're 7 souls with 7 lifetimes of scientific knowledge. Some of us built this device before. We understand the physics better than anyone currently alive. We just need to prove it. It took 4 months to execute the plan. 4 months of video calls, shared documents, coordinated drawings, where each witness contributed their piece of the technical specifications. They recreated the device from memory, 7 minds working as one, filling in gaps in each other's knowledge. What Lucas couldn't remember about the energy calculations, May provided. What May didn't know about the orbital mechanics, Arjun supplied. What Arjun missed in the materials science, Thomas completed. Dr. Graves and his team worked as intermediaries, translating the children's knowledge into academic papers, research proposals, scientific correspondence. They created anonymous accounts, ghost researchers, phantom doctoral candidates who existed only on paper, but whose work was brilliant, undeniable, revolutionary. They began submitting corrections to publish papers on solar energy collection, small corrections at first, minor adjustments to equations that the original authors had gotten almost right. But those small corrections led to big implications. The scientific community noticed. When an anonymous source correctly predicted a solar flare 3 days before any official monitoring station detected it, people paid attention. When that same source published a paper detailing previously unknown feedback mechanisms in solar orbital energy systems, the Norwegian Solar Initiative took notice. Sarah watched her son transform over those months. Lucas still had seizures, but they were different now. Purposeful. He would induce them sometimes, meditating himself into a state where the memories flowed more freely. He would emerge with new information, new specifications, new pieces of the puzzle. He was 7 years old and spoke like a physicist. He was 7 years old and drew mathematical proofs that Dr. Rostova had to get verified by university professors who looked at them with astonished confusion. How does a child produce this? One professor asked over a video call. This is doctoral-level work, beyond doctoral. This is the kind of insight that comes from decades of research. Dr. Graves smiled blandly. We have very gifted consultants. Can you verify if the mathematics is sound? It's more than sound, it's elegant. Whoever calculated this deserves a Fields Medal. The Norwegian Solar Initiative reached out through academic channels, looking for the mysterious researchers who had been publishing such groundbreaking work. Dr. Graves orchestrated the introduction carefully. He presented himself as representing a collective of independent scientists, brilliant but reclusive, who were willing to consult on the project. He negotiated terms, remote work, anonymous contribution, generous compensation that he funneled into trust funds for the 7 children. By month 6, the witnesses were inside. They had access to the actual designs, the real specifications of the device the NSI was building. And they were wrong, not catastrophically wrong like in previous cycles, but wrong enough. The safety margins were insufficient. The feedback dampening system was inadequate. The resonance frequency calculations were off by 3%. 3% that would mean the difference between clean energy and planetary extinction. The children worked through their handlers, through Dr. Graves and Dr. Rostova, and a growing network of researchers who had been briefed on the situation. Most of them didn't believe the reincarnation aspect. They thought the children were savants, prodigies with inexplicable intuitive understanding of advanced physics. But they couldn't deny the results. Every suggestion the children made, when tested, proved correct. Every adjustment they proposed improved the system's stability. Lucas spent his days in school, pretending to struggle with third-grade math while his nights were consumed with quantum field calculations. Emma attended second grade in Minnesota, drawing pictures during art class that were actually schematic diagrams she would photograph and send to the group. May's parents had pulled her from school entirely, hiring tutors who taught her advanced physics under the guise of enrichment for a gifted child. The Russian boy, Dmitri, had the hardest time. His family's religious beliefs made them suspicious of his knowledge. They thought he was speaking with demons. It took weeks of careful negotiation by Dr. Graves to convince them that their son was blessed, not cursed, that his knowledge was meant to save lives. The changes they introduced were subtle. A decimal point shifted, a coefficient adjusted, a material substitution recommended based on better thermal properties. Nothing that would raise immediate red flags, but everything designed to accumulate, to ensure that when the device powered up, it would fail quickly, obviously, and safely. But then Lucas had another seizure, the worst one yet. 9 minutes. Sarah called 911. The paramedics arrived to find him still convulsing, his eyes that terrible white, his body locked rigid. They administered emergency medications. Nothing worked. The seizure continued. 10 minutes. 11. Sarah rode in the ambulance, holding his hand, begging him to come back. At 14 minutes, it stopped. Lucas went limp. The monitors showed stable vital signs, but he didn't wake up. The ER doctor admitted him to intensive care. Sarah sat by his bed, watching the machines breathe for him, watching his chest rise and fall artificially. Dr. Graves arrived within the hour, bringing Dr. Rostova and James Chen. The other witnesses knew immediately. Across the world, 6 children woke from sleep at the exact moment Lucas's seizure began. They felt it. The connection between them had grown stronger over the months of shared memory, shared purpose. When one of them suffered, they all felt it. May's parents called. She was having a seizure too. Simultaneous. Arjun collapsed in his grandmother's kitchen in Mumbai. Gabriella began convulsing during dinner in Sao Paulo. Thomas, Dimitri, Emma, all 7 at the same moment experiencing the same massive neurological event. Something's wrong. Dr. Rostova paced the hospital corridor. This isn't normal, even for them. This is synchronized. Something triggered all of them at once. James Chen was on his phone, checking news feeds, searching for anything unusual. His face went pale. Oh no, oh God, no. He turned his phone around. The headline read, Norwegian Solar Initiative announces accelerated launch schedule. Target date, December 18th. That's next week. Dr. Graves felt his stomach drop. They moved it up. They moved up the launch by 6 months. Why would they do that? James scrolled through the article. Political pressure. Climate summit. They want to unveil it as a demonstration of commitment to clean energy, a symbolic gesture ahead of the UN conference. But the device isn't ready. It needs the modifications. It needs the safety adjustments we've been implementing. Dr. Rostova grabbed the phone, reading frantically. If they launch the unfinished version, if they activate it without the changes, then the feedback loop happens anyway. We failed. Again. In the ICU, Lucas's eyes opened, not gradually, not with the slow return of consciousness that doctors expected. All at once, white eyes, glowing. He sat up, pulling the ventilator tube from his throat before anyone could stop him. He shouldn't have been able to. He shouldn't have been conscious at all. But he moved with strength that wasn't his own, with purpose that transcended his small body. Mom. His voice was layered, multiple voices speaking at once, 7 witnesses speaking through one throat. We're out of time. They moved up the launch. We felt it. The timeline shifted. Everything we did was based on a June activation. December changes everything. Sarah rushed to him, trying to make him lie back down. Alarms were going off. Nurses were running in. But Lucas pushed past them with impossible strength. He disconnected himself from the monitors, from the IVs, from every machine tethering him to the bed. We need to go to Norway. All of us. All 7 witnesses. Now. This is the moment. This is what we've been waiting for across 7 lifetimes. This is where we either break the cycle or repeat it forever. Dr. Graves stepped forward. Lucas, you're 7 years old. You just had a 14-minute seizure. You need medical care. This body is 7 years old. I am much, much older, and I'm done failing. We all are. Lucas looked at Sarah with eyes that held centuries. Mom, I need you to trust me. I need you to let me go. I need you to understand that I'm not just your son. I'm everyone's son. 7 mothers have loved me. 7 mothers have lost me. I need to make sure this is the last time. I need to break the cycle so I can finally rest. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She looked at this child who was so much more than a child, this soul who had carried such impossible weight for so long. She thought about fighting it. She thought about holding him here, keeping him safe, refusing to let him walk into danger. But she saw the determination in those ancient eyes. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the desperate hope that maybe, finally, this time could be different. She nodded. Tell me what you need. They flew to Norway on a chartered plane, funded by emergency liquidation of assets Dr. Graves had been accumulating for exactly this kind of crisis. All 7 witnesses and their families. Sarah watched the other children board, saw the same ancient weariness in each of their young faces. They recognized each other instantly, moving toward one another like magnets, like pieces of a whole finally coming together. The children sat in a circle in the back of the plane, holding hands, eyes closed. They were remembering together, fully synchronized now, their consciousness blending and separating and blending again. The parents watched nervously. The researchers took notes. But mostly everyone just felt the weight of what was happening, the strangeness of it. The impossible truth of 7 souls who had loved and lost and tried and failed 6 times before. May spoke first, her voice dreamy. In the second cycle, we almost succeeded. We got within hours of stopping it. But there was a backup system we didn't know about. When we shut down the primary controls, the backup activated automatically. We need to remember where that backup is. Thomas continued the thought, his British accent blending with something older, something that transcended nationality. The backup was hidden, not in the main facility. Remote location, mountains. We need to disable both simultaneously. Arjun's small voice added another piece. The launch is in 6 days, but the activation happens during the launch sequence. Once the device reaches orbital position, there's a 30-minute window before automatic engagement. That's our window. That's when we act. Gabriella opened her eyes. The security. It wasn't this tight before. They've learned. Each cycle they build more protections, more guards, more fail-safes. Getting inside won't be easy. Dimitri's deep voice rumbled. We don't need to get inside. We need to transmit the shutdown codes remotely. Lucas knows them. He programmed them in the first cycle. If the codes haven't changed across iterations, if there's some constant across the cycles, we can stop it without ever entering the facility. Emma squeezed Lucas's hand. But if the codes have changed, if this version is different, then someone has to get inside. Someone has to manually shut it down. And that person probably doesn't come back. Lucas opened his eyes. I know. I've always known. In every cycle, one of us has to sacrifice. One witness trades their life to save everyone else. It's the only way. The device won't shut down without a physical override. The backup system requires a human presence to confirm the shutdown. They designed it that way to prevent exactly what we're trying to do. They thought they were preventing sabotage. They were actually preventing salvation. The parents had been listening. Sarah felt ice in her veins. No, absolutely not. I didn't bring you here to die. Mum, I've died 7 times already. This body dying is just one more. But if we do this right, then I won't have to come back. I won't have to remember again. I can finally rest. We all can. The plane landed in Oslo. They had 4 days until launch. Dr. Graves had arranged accommodations at a hotel near the NSI facility, using his academic credentials to justify their presence. They were officially there to observe the historic launch, guests of the scientific community. Unofficially, they were there to stop the extinction of the human race. The children worked around the clock. They built a device from components purchased at electronics stores, assembled on the hotel room floor. It was a transmitter designed to broadcast the shutdown codes on the frequency the orbital collector would be monitoring. Lucas remembered the codes. He'd created them 743 years ago. He drew them out in binary, in hexadecimal, in quantum encryption protocols that shouldn't exist yet but did, because he remembered them from a civilization that hadn't been born yet in this timeline. Dr. Rostova helped translate his memories into functioning technology. James Chen handled the antenna assembly. Dr. Graves coordinated with contacts inside the NSI, people who'd been reading the anonymous research papers, who trusted the ghost scientists, even if they didn't understand where the knowledge came from. On December 16th, 2 days before launch, they tested the transmitter. It worked. The signal reached the NSI facility, but within an hour, security teams were sweeping for the source. The NSI had detected the unauthorized transmission. They were looking for saboteurs. We can't transmit again. Doctor. Graves paced the hotel room. They'll triangulate the source. They'll shut us down before launch day. Then we go with the backup plan. Lucas stood, his small frame somehow commanding. I go inside. I get to the manual override. I shut it down from within. You're 7 years old. They'll never let you into the facility. Sarah's voice broke. They will if I prove who I am. If I demonstrate knowledge only the original designers would have. Lucas pulled out his drawings, the technical specifications, the mathematical proofs. I'll show them I know more about their device than they do. They'll bring me in as a curiosity, a savant, a child genius who somehow intuited their deepest secrets. And once I'm inside, once I'm close enough to the override, I'll activate it. The device will fail safely, the launch will be aborted, the cycle will break. May stood beside him. You're not going alone. We're 7 witnesses. We all carry the weight. We all take the risk. Continue Claude 4-5 sonet pensamento raciocinio concluído. Pensou por 5 segundos. Number Lucas shook his head firmly. This isn't about shared burden anymore. This is about efficiency. They'll be suspicious of 7 children appearing together, but 1 child, 1 prodigy, that's explainable. That's containable. They'll think they can control me. They'll underestimate me because of this body. That's our advantage. The other witnesses formed a circle around him, placing their hands on his shoulders, his head, his chest. They closed their eyes, and something passed between them. Energy, memory, strength. Sarah watched her son's body glow faintly, watched the air around them shimmer like heat rising from pavement. When they separated, Lucas stood taller. His eyes held not just his memories now, but all of them. 7 lifetimes fully integrated. 7 perspectives merged into one purpose. We're giving you everything we remember. Arjun stepped back, swaying slightly. You carry all of us now. All our knowledge, all our experience. You won't be alone in there. Dr. Graves made the call. He contacted the NSI head of security, a man named Halverson, and explained that he had a child in his care who possessed inexplicable knowledge of their project, a child who might be a security risk, a child they needed to interview. The meeting was arranged for December 17th, the day before launch. They brought Lucas to the facility at noon. He wore ordinary clothes, looked like any 7-year-old, small and fragile and harmless. But when they sat him in the interrogation room, when they began asking questions, everything changed. How do you know about this project? Halverson leaned across the table. Lucas didn't hesitate. Because I designed the original version 743 years ago. Because I've watched it destroy the world 6 times. Because I'm here to make sure it doesn't happen a 7th time. Halverson laughed. That's quite an imagination, son. Lucas picked up a pen and began writing equations on the paper in front of him. These are the resonance frequency calculations for your orbital collector. You have them wrong. You're using a dampening coefficient of 0.73. It should be 0.69. The difference seems small, but over sustained operation, it creates a feedback amplification of 14%. That 14% is what triggers the solar instability. Halverson stopped laughing. He picked up the paper, studying the equations. His hand shook slightly. How do you know these numbers? These calculations are classified. Top secret. I know them because I invented them. Lucas met his eyes. And I know they're wrong because I've seen what happens when you use them. I've felt the heat of the world burning. I've watched the sky split open. I've died screaming while the atmosphere ignited. 6 times. I'm not letting it happen again. Halverson left the room. Through the one-way mirror, Sarah and Dr. Graves watched him make phone calls, urgent conversations with people higher up the chain of command. 15 minutes later, the lead scientist entered the room, Dr. Johanna Christensen, the woman whose name was on half the patents, whose research had made the entire project possible. She sat across from Lucas, studying him with intense curiosity. My team tells me you've written equations that match our internal calculations, calculations that have never been published, never been shared outside a very small group, because they're mine. I created them in my first life. I was named something different then, but the mathematics are the same. Mathematics don't change across lifetimes. Lucas pushed another paper across the table, this one covered in his precise drawings. This is your device. Every component, every connection, every safety system. And this, he pointed to a specific section, is the flaw, the weakness you don't know about, the thing that will kill everyone if you activate it as designed. Dr. Christensen's face went pale as she examined the drawing. The level of detail was impossible. He'd drawn components that existed only in their secure labs, modifications they'd made just last week, connections that weren't in any official schematic because they were last-minute field adjustments. "Who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm the person trying to save your life, and everyone else's." Lucas stood, suddenly commanding despite his small stature. "Your launch is tomorrow. I need access to your facility. I need to make adjustments to the safety systems, and I need you to trust that I know what I'm talking about, even though it sounds insane, because the alternative is extinction." Dr. Christensen stared at him for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would determine the fate of the world. She nodded. "Show me." They brought him into the facility, into areas where even most employees weren't cleared to enter. Sarah followed, her clearance granted as his guardian. Dr. Graves and Dr. Rostova came as his research team. The other witnesses waited at the hotel, their consciousness still linked to Lucas, feeding him information, supporting him from a distance. Lucas walked through the facility like he owned it. He pointed out design flaws the engineers had noted but not yet corrected. He identified equipment that would fail under sustained load. He adjusted settings on computers, explaining the purpose of each change in technical language that made the scientists around him scramble to take notes. But he was working toward the center, toward the main control room, toward the manual override that only activated when a human operator physically engaged it. The override that would safely shut down the device, but required someone to stay at the terminal, holding the connection while the shutdown sequence completed. A sequence that would take 4 minutes. 4 minutes during which the person at the terminal would be exposed to radiation levels that were immediately fatal. They reached the control room at 6 in the evening, 12 hours before launch. The room was massive, filled with screens and terminals and the quiet hum of advanced technology. At the center, isolated on a raised platform, was the override terminal. Lucas walked to it like he was coming home. "This is it. This is where I need to be when you activate the device. When it reaches orbital position and begins its power-up sequence, I'll initiate the shutdown from here. The device will fail, but fail safely. The launch will be aborted. Everything you've worked for will be over, but everyone will live." Dr. Christensen looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You're asking me to destroy 8 years of work, billions of dollars, the solution to climate change, the future of clean energy. I'm asking you to choose life over ambition." Lucas's voice was gentle. "I understand what you're feeling. I felt it too in my first life. I wanted so badly to save the world that I didn't see how I was ending it. Please, don't make the same mistake I did." She looked around the control room, at her life's work, at the technology that was supposed to change everything. Then she looked at this impossible child who knew things he shouldn't know, who carried weight no child should carry. "If I agree, if I let you do this, what happens to you? The override terminal, the radiation exposure during shutdown sequence. It's lethal. We designed it that way to prevent unauthorized use." "I know." Lucas smiled sadly. "I'm the one who suggested that safety feature. I thought I was being clever. I didn't realize I was creating the method of my own sacrifice. But it's okay. I'm tired. 7 lifetimes is enough. I'm ready to rest." Sarah felt her world collapse. She grabbed Lucas, pulling him away from the terminal. "No, we'll find another way. There has to be another way." "There isn't, Mom." Lucas hugged her tight. "I've looked. 7 times I've looked for another way. This is it. 1 life to save billions. 1 sacrifice to break the cycle. It's always been the equation. I just needed enough time to accept it." The other witnesses felt it through their connection. In the hotel, 6 children stood simultaneously and began walking. They moved as one, driven by shared purpose, shared love for the boy who was about to give everything. Their families followed, confused but trusting. They arrived at the facility as night fell. Security tried to stop them, but Dr. Christensen overrode the protocols. She was beginning to believe, beginning to understand that something much larger than science was happening here. The witnesses gathered in the control room surrounding Lucas, their hands joined in a circle. "We're with you." May's voice was steady. "Until the very end. Whatever happens, you don't face it alone." The night passed in preparation. Dr. Christensen quietly instructed her team to prepare for abort protocols, framing it as a safety drill. She didn't tell them the real reason. She didn't tell them that a 7-year-old boy was about to decide the fate of the world. Launch morning arrived cold and clear. The facility buzzed with excitement, scientists and engineers and politicians gathering to witness history. The orbital collector sat in its launch vehicle, ready to ascend, ready to change everything. Sarah held Lucas one last time, memorizing every detail of his face, his small hands, his ancient eyes. "I love you, baby. Every version of you. Every lifetime. I love you too, Mom. And thank you for believing me, for letting me do what I needed to do." Lucas kissed her cheek. "Tell my story. Make sure people remember why this happened. Make sure they don't try to build this thing again in the next cycle, if there is a next cycle." The launch sequence began. The device ascended perfectly, rising on pillars of fire, climbing toward orbit. The control room erupted in cheers. Dr. Christensen watched the telemetry, watched the device reach its designated position, watched the automatic systems begin their power-up sequence. Now, Lucas broke from the group and ran to the override terminal. His small hands barely reached the controls, but he knew exactly what to touch, exactly what to activate. He entered the shutdown codes from memory, 7 lifetimes of memory, codes that hadn't changed because some constants exist across all cycles. The system responded. Shutdown sequence initiated. 4 minutes to completion. Radiation warning. Lethal exposure imminent. Evacuate immediately. Alarms screamed. Scientists rushed for exits, but the 7 witnesses remained, forming a protective circle around Lucas. They couldn't stop the radiation, couldn't prevent what was about to happen, but they could bear witness. They could make sure he didn't die alone. The radiation was invisible, but Lucas felt it immediately. It started as warmth, then heat, then burning that went deeper than skin, deeper than bone. His hands stayed on the terminal, maintaining the connection, holding the shutdown sequence active. On the screens above, they could see the orbital device powering down, see the energy levels dropping, see the feedback loop that would have triggered solar instability dissipating harmlessly. "It's working," Dr. Christensen's voice cracked. "The device is shutting down safely. You did it. You actually did it." 3 minutes remaining. Lucas's vision blurred. The pain was extraordinary, but he'd felt worse. He'd felt the entire world burning. This was nothing compared to that. This was just one body dying, just one more death in a long line of deaths. But this time, it meant something. This time, it was stopping the cycle.